Okay, everybody, nice to see you. Pizza at the back, help yourself along the way. There's one rule of my club, no pizza left behind, so it all goes, you take it home with you. It is my pleasure to introduce Alexander Harriman, who is a math sciences major, but he's also part of Clemson Athletics as well, and he is going to tell us about sports analytics.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming on out to this amazing talk on sports. I was going to name this one "The Wide World of Sports Analytics," but it seemed like a little overused, so I went for this title instead. But I think I used it in the abstract of the email anyway. But my name is Alexander Herman. I am currently a sports science intern with Clemson Olympic Athletics Strength and Conditioning. Right now, I do a lot of data analysis stuff for the baseball team, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I've been doing sports analytics stuff for about a little over a year now, and I figured that I would share both some of the things I have worked on and also some of the things I've learned. And mostly because I know this time last year I was looking for someone in the field that could help me figure out what even is sports analytics. So I figured I'd pass that along. Is anyone here interested in possibly going into sports analytics in the future? Hey, at least got one. So, all right, let's get started here. Look, this is math.
How would you have answered that question if you had asked yourself that a year ago?
If I was interested in going to sports analytics, I would have said yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wouldn't have really known what that meant.
Okay.
But we'll start things off with a good question. And this is a sort of question that people get paid millions and millions of dollars to figure out on a yearly basis. I've got two people right here. It's QB1 and QB2 because I'm very creative. And I have listed here some of their career college statistics. They're both pretty good. They both had a very successful careers. They both won a national championship as a starter. And here's the real question. You see those numbers. What do you take?
Quarterback 2.
You take quarterback 2?
Yes.
Anyone taking quarterback 1? Anyone else want to jump on quarterback 2? No? All right. Well, all right. We'll see if you made the right choice later. All right. We'll come back to this. But a little more about me. We'll get the fun out of the way now. I was born in England. Insert your British jokes here. Yeah, I get it. I am a math science major. This is my final semester of undergrad. I'll be graduating this May, and then I like Clemson enough that I decided to stay for grad school. So I spent this past summer with Stanford University working with their Center for Sports Analytics, and that's actually what the bulk of this talk will be about, some of the things I did with them. But let's get into it. So what is sports analytics? Well, there's two different answers. The long answer is what you might find in a dictionary. That sports analytics is the use of data analysis or statistical processes to determine some information hidden underneath the surface regarding some problem related to sports. But the real answer is whatever you want it to be, really. Sports analytics involves far more than anything that I for one, thought it would be. And you could really take sports analytics anywhere, to any field, in any capacity. I'll explain some of that here in a little bit. The way I look at sports analytics, I break it down into 4 major subsets. Like what I like to call performance analysis, result analysis, the strength and conditioning side, and then coaching. The coaching side is, well, it's coaching. You can probably imagine what a sports coach does. There are specific data coaches, but that one's, admittedly, I don't have as much knowledge with that, and it's a little more self-explanatory. So I'm going to focus on the first 3. And we'll start with performance analytics. So what I like to define this as analysis purely dedicated to improving performance on the field in some way. This example would be the NFL draft. The question I showed you at the very beginning, in fact. You have these two quarterbacks, who's going to be best for your team? And there's a lot riding on those decisions. A lot of people's jobs, a lot of fans' interests. To make, we've seen a few examples where that can make or break a team. This is what I most think of when you say sports analytics. It's things like this. And you may also think of this. Anyone heard of Moneyball? So this is Brad Pitt. Well, we all know Brad Pitt around here, but he is representing, I believe still current, A's general manager Billy Beane, who back in the early 2000s with the Oakland Athletics realized he could build a roster that could win baseball games without needing to necessarily pay for the superstars that required it. He went and found undervalued players and undervalued roles and managed to make one of the best teams of the early 2000s on mere pennies compared to teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox even, and many of the other big market teams he had competed with. That Moneyball is what performance analytics is in a nutshell. Trying to find undervalued commodities or trying to find something to give yourself a competitive edge that no one else can see. My best example would be going back to NFL quarterbacks, and I promise this is not an NFL presentation. I worked this past summer on a project involving quarterback success in the NFL based on various statistics. Here are a few of them. We have completion percentage, interceptions per game, quarterback rating, and the bars you see here are the correlations between these intangibles and whether they actually contribute to success at the pro level or not. And I specifically want to look at the intangibles to see if they mean anything, because you hear, some of y'all I'm sure have heard, there's these red flags. The best example I can think of, Arizona Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray. He was the first overall pick 2 years ago, but there are people who probably would have said he shouldn't have been picked at all, or at least a lot lower, because he's 5'10" and his hands are about less than quarterback size. It's things like that I want to investigate. Is that really the case? So look at the amount of games played in college, draft age, where you played, if you were an underclassman or not. Things that at the surface don't matter. And this study found that for the most part, I mean, they kind of don't. Although I did find out that NFL teams know what they're doing because they know higher draft picks do better. This is actually one of the big reasons I want to talk about this was probably the first lesson I learned, that just because you do a study and find nothing is something. You know, I did this study and we didn't find a whole lot of correlations between a lot of these intangibles and draft picks. That means that they don't have as much weight as some people might be giving them credit for. And that's the sort of information that could be valuable. So even at the surface, you see a lot of white space here. This is actually one where I was one of the most surprised, because it showed information that I didn't know and I actually wouldn't have never expected. So when you're doing sports data analytics, or really data analytics at any capacity, don't be afraid to get an answer that doesn't really say much, because by saying not a whole lot, it's telling you something. It's the equivalent of you're doing a puzzle and you figure out what isn't the correct answer. You're a little bit closer to finding the right one, right?
I have a question related to something you said, and I don't know how it works, but you know, you said that, like, you know, the NFL teams, you know, the people that are picked sooner in the draft tend to be better, but those people that are picked earlier in the draft, they pay more for them, right? And do the teams put more resources into those people and try to develop them more vigorously than, you know, somebody who just barely gets picked last?
That's a good question. And to that regard, that would probably be like another analysis, because I would think yes. You would think that someone picked first overall, like Trevor Lawrence, would probably get a little more attention than a guy who's picked at the end of the draft.
Right.
Especially considering earlier guys are usually determined as the savior of the franchise or whatever, or similar term. But that, I mean, that would be another study, right? That would be if the money and if that is actually what's making them better, or if it's just they're more talented to begin with, right?
Right.
So I can give you what I believe as an answer, but I can't give you a statistics answer.
Right.
Speaking of, I'll say that you were correct on picking QB2, if only because the guy who picked QB1 is almost lost his job. But that's the sort of thing, right? Quarterback one is Trevor Lawrence, but the second one did a lot better last year in the NFL as a rookie. Does that mean anything? Who knows? I mean, any all NFL fans? And I'm sure you know what Trevor Lawrence had to go through last year compared to Mac Jones. So the equivalent of going through hell on earth.
What happened?
Trevor Lawrence had to go to Jacksonville, and I'm not going to get too bogged down with details, but it was a little bit of a circus. The head coach got fired 13 games into the season, and with cause for doing a lot of unsavory things. Yeah, it's kind of a wasted year, but that's the thing, right? It was a wasted year, and it did cost people's jobs.
But isn't it true still that doesn't Peyton Manning have the record for the most interceptions in rookie years still?
I believe so. Yes. But yeah, that's the thing. He had a pretty good career last time I checked.
But a counterpoint, Dr. Clark, to will be that his positive numbers like touchdowns and yards were a lot better than Trevor's.
Right.
Also.
But that's the thing. Unfortunately, both of these guys could have great careers. We could look back in this 10 years time and they could both be on the track to make the NFL Hall of Fame. But in the world of sports analytics, sometimes you got to come up with decisions, and they sometimes have to pay off. At the end of the day, no one's going to be perfect. I mean, there are plenty of teams that have probably invested millions of dollars and tons of resources into picking a guy who was a bust. But at the end of the day, what sports analytics tries to do is, to the best of our knowledge, make the right decisions. And whichever one works out, that'll be determined in the future. So a little on performance analysis, we're going to move to results. And this is where I kind of split them up between performance and results. Results is very similar, but I like to think of it as taking a look into past events to try to uncover a trend. Performance analysis is almost more in the present of sorts. This is more historical, at least to me, and there is a slight difference. I included this quote from one of the, if not the most successful Italian soccer club, Juventus, that winning isn't important, it's the only thing that counts. That is their mantra. It's been their mantra for a while, and they pretty much live by that. If you are not a winner, you're showing the door. And for results analysis, the goal is to win, as a lot of sports analytics are. But for this one, especially for results analysis, that's key to it. We're looking for ways to improve winning in the future based on what we've seen in the past. That may be as obvious as for LA soccer. Yeah, obviously we need to score more goals, but how do you score more goals? Some of my coworkers are actually working on that with the Clemson's men's soccer team last year. That's the sort of stuff that goes into this. Yes.
Like, is the goal of the job to be like just to sort of win more competitions and get higher points, or is it like to earn more money for the team? Like, is that the priority?
That depends on what you're doing with it. Because there are definitely different types of analytics that work with the marketing side, the money side. There are some that work with performance. Strength and conditioning is kind of more improving athletes' individual performance. So that really is dependent on specific roles within the company. And that goes to my point about it can be really whatever you want, because yeah, that a sports analyst can work but to make more money for the team. It's a different side than results side, and for the most part, this presentation is more on the results side. That's what I've been doing more with. But to your point, yeah, some analysts work to make more money for the team. And to a certain extent, this also can make more money for the team in an indirect way. So it really does depend on what your role, like what an individual on the team would be and what their end goal is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
not sure, like exactly, if there's like a one-to-one correlation between doing well and earning money for the team. don't know.
I think there's a strong correlation, but
There's probably a strong correlation, but I mean, one of the best ways to build a winning team is to just file the best players. That's probably not a good way to make money. So I wouldn't say it's one-to-one exact.
So it seems like the Marlins have made a ton of money while just being terrible for a decade.
That's exactly, yeah.
Also for sports leagues that share revenue between all the teams, then that would probably blunt the effect of winning.
Right. I mean, I think speaking of the Marlins, the year they won the World Series, I believe they lost money on that because they spent so much to get top talent, but they ended up losing money and they blew it up immediately. So it's like 1 year.
2003 or both? No, they won twice.
Oh, yeah, I guess they did it twice, didn't they?
I remember the first time of year they sold everybody next year, 2003, I think it was, when they beat the Yankees.
Well, they did that in 1998 as well. They went from winning the World Series to losing 109 games, I believe. That's a sustainability at its finest, ladies and gentlemen.
Maybe it was.
So finally, we have something here that is not football or soccer, which I guess is also still football, but I digress. One of the other projects I did this past summer involved looking at college basketball recruit rankings. And this one was, okay, again, how, what aspects of a basketball player affects their NBA success, and in particular, their college ranking. Does the #1 recruit in high school have more NBA success? And this, I wanted to include this one because this has probably the second important thing I learned was the results of a study can also lead to future studies. When my boss and I went through this, I kind of expected that the ranking wouldn't really matter. One thing that surprised me was that the college you went to very much matters. It's significant everywhere. And in particular, that the last column, win shares per 48, is a statistic that tries to determine overall value for every 48 minutes you're on the court. So it's more of the overall picture statistic, and that has a strong correlation. So what we then did after that is research which colleges were the best at developing players, and that turned into its own study. And for any of y'all who like Clemson basketball, you'd be happy to learn that Syracuse is one of the worst, our ACC rivals, along with other rivals like UNC, Florida State's down there. A lot of the ACC schools, unfortunately, Clemson did not have enough pros to qualify. But this sort of study was never planned. I figured that this one right here, the first one, it'd be one study moving on, because my work over the summer was very fast paced. Basically, the idea was you're going to do 5 projects or you're going to get fired. But once we found these results, this is almost the obvious next step in a way, to see what the results would find. And on it from here, we could probably go farther. I didn't, but you probably could. Yes.
Yeah. You said a bit about what that says again. I can't read it. Is it success relative to like their high school rankings, or the
Here, so for this one in particular, this is looking, so it's a little fuzzy, my apologies for that.
you're saying development, and if Kentucky brings in the best players, then they're going to do well. But is it relative to like their rankings going into college and going to the NBA, or is it
So
something?
this is based on the NBA statistics for rebounds per game, points, and assists. And what we did is we took the amount of first round picks a college produced, and then we found the average number to make up for the fact that Kentucky, Duke, UNC are basically factories for these types of players, to see on average like how good are these schools actually.
you account for the fact that like Duke and Kentucky have a whole bunch of like top 5 picks and then a bunch of, but
Not to that regard, no.
I feel like there's, in the
Although
NBA
there's-
more than some sports, like the top 5 are probably a lot better than say the bottom. I mean, there's a
Right,
huge
no,
difference.
that's right,
Like
right,
LeBron James, et cetera.
yeah. Although, we didn't, admittedly, we did not count for that. However, what we still found interesting is that Duke and Kentucky, while they did really well, were not near the top. They were near the top, but they were not in the top, I think even 5, really.
There's definitely some schools in there that have not had a top 10 pick probably, or at least, or not very many, and there's ones that have had a whole bunch.
Right. We did set the bar at 4 players, for 4 first-round picks at minimum, which is why Clemson's not here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I
But still,
believe,
Georgia Tech's, top 4 is gonna be different than rankings.
yeah, I believe, because otherwise, I think Davidson would be the number 1 just because they had 1 first-round pick.
Yeah.
Stat correct. Which would be far off all these players. But but the idea of research can build off of research and it can continue down the line. We could go farther, to your point, like we could look at, okay, now let's weight it for where these players were picked and see relative to that. Or we could include all picks. If this is only first round picks, we could go second round picks, could go farther back in time. So when working in sports analytics, while you're looking for like one answer, there is no necessarily open and shut project case. Especially considering a lot of these projects, I came up with the question and the answer. If you're given a question, there's going to be a lot of different ways to answer that question. The third one, this is what I currently do. We're going to shift off of what I have done, what we currently do. Strength and conditioning analysis. So this is more of the team behind the scenes. These are the people that work with individual athletes to determine, among other things, how much the player should be training, or if a player's coming back from injury, how hard should they be pushed, or to what timetable should be to get them back to full strength. Well, the idea is it's just more individual in scale. However, it's on a team-wide scale, but it's more individual in nature. It's the right way to say that. This is where you get a lot more of your large databases, a lot more technology involved. For example, right now, I'll bring in what we're doing now. We are taking baseball pitch data from the last 3 years, and there's a system called TrackMap that almost has a radar recording of a pitch as a pitcher goes through the motions. It takes a signal and turns it into data, and there's 80 some odd variables of data that it tracks throughout the pitch. And so we have this database of well over 1 million pitches with all these statistics. And right now our goal is to see, okay, we're trying to quantify how good a pitch is, which is not an easy question to answer. This project in particular is probably going to take the next 1.5 to 2 years, if not more. So that's the other thing. The projects I did this past summer were more open and shut cases. But in the sports field, you would have projects where they take a long time. Because you need plenty of data. You need to keep tracking that data to see if you need to update your model. The strength and conditioning team is what I like to call the team behind the team. These guys are just as much part of the success on the field as the athletes. Case in point, I was working this past semester with the men's soccer team, creating soccer training dashboards. There we go. Thought that was next. We took some of the training data from the players, and my job was to make them look nice so they could present to the coaches. And because if you don't want to hand a coach a .csv file, you don't hand them something that they can understand and read, visualize, and be able to make informed opinions with. And I don't want to use the term without having them go through the work of it, but I mean, you don't want to make them work. You don't want to get people to work too hard to answer the question. So what we do is that for data, as data analysts, we are trying to inform these coaches' decisions. We're not trying to have them learn our jobs because, well, that they have their own jobs. They're doing coaching. They don't have time for that. So what I did is make things like this, and it is cut off because I cannot share full information for proprietary reasons. But this is the best I could do. Here's a specific play from the men's team based on certain games from last year and the maximum velocity that he ran and how much he ran during those games. This data came from a system called Catapult that tracks more statistics like these and others throughout a game or a practice session. And my role was to take the data and put it into this is Tableau to make it look nice and make it customizable for the coaching staff to go in and be able to say, for example, this is from early in the season, but later in the season, as an example, the players ran a lot more in the playoffs, more high intensity games. As a result, the coaching staff did a little bit easier training after those games because these players were working their butts off in order to win the high intensity games at Oregon State, against Notre Dame, and then against Washington. It's those sorts of decisions that we on the strength and conditioning side help inform the coaching staff to make. So that's like the big three parts of sports analytics. I'm gonna get into some of the misconceptions about the field that I wish I knew a year ago. The first one, working in sports analytics is not just working for a sports team. This project right here is not for a sports team. This is a major analysis of the 2020 Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. And what I did or how I contributed to this, I took data from Twitter, analyzed who was tweeting about the games in the United States, and my boss and I, we co-authored this paper. We found that Americans that are in left-leaning states are more likely to tweet about the Olympics than those in right-leaning states. At the surface, that is not exactly a topic you would associate with sports, but we did sports analysis. We took data, we analyzed it in a sports context. You can work for various third parties, working with various types of data, doing various field work and various publications, and still do sports analytics. It's not as simple as, oh, there's X number of teams, one of them has to hire me. There are plenty of opportunities outside of simply working for a team, crunching numbers, doing Moneyball related stuff that you can get involved with sports analytics. One other one is that they're not, and to that point, not all sports analytics jobs are the same. A lot of them do involve a lot of data, a lot of crunching numbers, and a lot of analysis, but not all of it is necessarily huge amounts of coding. A lot of the work I did this past summer with Stanford was very little coding at all. Most of it was actually data collection. And then it was simple analysis and things like Excel, SPSS, for those of y'all who've heard of, basically IBM's version of Excel, and things of that nature. It was not hundreds of lines of code at all. There are projects that involve hundreds of lines of code in R or Python, but there's a wide variety of opportunities. There's a wide variety of project scopes. So it's not just a one size fits all system like I had once thought. Also, and this is probably the most important one, sports analytics is a really competitive field, but it is not impossible to get into, and you do not need to be a statistician with years upon years of work at X company in order to get into the field. I'm 20 years old. I'm not going to say I'm a professional. I'm not going to say that I've completed in life or anything, but the fact that I'm even just standing here talking about the work I've done the last year, I would never have thought that possible a year ago. there are ways to get into the field there are ways that y'all can get to the field right now, just by reaching out to a company or a school or whatever, and just getting involved. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, obviously, but it can be done. And for those of y'all who do want to pursue sports analytics, all it really takes is just finding that right person. I know it's very cliche, but it's true. All it takes is like do what I did. Whenever I get my current job, I reached out to Clemson Athletics. I emailed them saying, "Hey, this is who I am. I'm interested in doing sports analytics in the future. Is there a way I can get involved?" I heard back from the strength and conditioning department, and they said, "Yeah, we're trying to make a program. We're gonna get some interns in. Do you want to join us? Send your resume. We'll talk." And now I'm working in the strength and conditioning department 6-7 months later. And so on that note, here are some of my tips I've learned from various bosses or just experience myself to succeed. R and Python are the two most popular coding languages. Now there are others that are used, but MATLAB is maybe not as common, but it can be used. But R and Python are the big two from what I've seen. And my current boss, he gave me this piece of advice. It really doesn't matter which one you choose. Different teams, companies use different coding languages, but get very good at one of them. The more skilled you are at either language will benefit you more in the long run. Obviously knowing both is great, but personally I have far more experience with R. My boss has far more experience with Python, but we're still able to work together on projects because they're not the same, of course, but they have some correlation with each other. At the end of the day, what these teams and companies are looking for is, do you know how to can you code, especially for the jobs that require a lot of coding? Can you code? So picking one of the two languages and getting really good at it will probably get you farther than being okay at both. Although being very good at both is always a plus. Also, this is one that Sanford taught me. Social media is a very, very good tool for getting your name out there and showing off the stuff that you do, showing off if you like sports, how much you like sports, the work you do in sports, some of the ways you've gotten involved, just as long as, of course, you use it properly. The first day, this spring semester, my boss told us straight to our faces, if you give us a reason with something you put on social media to fire you, we will fire you without cause and at a moment's notice. Both teams are not going to mess around. But social media is also how my other boss, I have two bosses, it's a long story. That's how he's gotten to where he is. He posts about the projects he's done and it helped him get his name out there. So having a good, and keyword is good, social media presence will be very helpful. All right, and then so maybe you're thinking about getting involved, getting started. How would you do that? I mentioned how I reached out to Clemson Athletics directly. I also reached out to Sanford directly. But one of the most popular sources, if you want to just see wide options in general, or just want to get a better sense of maybe some of the varieties of opportunities, is Teamwork Online. They are a source that is almost a database where a lot of teams from some of the biggest names and highest professional leagues to random teams in minor leagues and independent leagues that you've never heard of in your life. They all post various internships, jobs, co-ops, etc. on this website. And this is probably, from what I've seen, one of the more collective sources for finding an opportunity within sports. There are other sources out there. Obviously, you have your Indeeds, your LinkedIn's, things like that are always useful. But Teamwork Online specializes in sports, and out of options that specialize in sports, this is probably one of the more cohesive, more collective ones I've found so far. All right, and that is my talk. Do y'all have any questions about sports analytics or anything, any of the research, anything at all? Yes?
Do you essentially work for like a single team, or is it something where you're working for a company that then other teams hire? Things like that.
You can take either route. Currently, like right now, I work for Clemson Athletics directly.
But does Clemson Athletics just do stuff for Clemson's team, or do they like work on other sports with other?
They might to some extent, but at least what I do, no, I'm working specifically with Clemson, specifically Clemson baseball team. But there are companies you can go and work for that are more freelance style, where they're hired by other teams to do things like, there's coaching firms that find the best coaches, firms that figure out the best draft picks, firms that maybe work more on the money side. So again, kind of like the idea, that's the question you asked earlier. It really does depend on what the company is and what the role is. I'd love to give us like 100% solid answer, but I don't know if there is one. It really does just depend on the company. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
So you may have said this, but it went by me. You going to grad school in the fall, is that right?
Yes.
Where are you going?
Here.
But I mean,
Data science and analytics.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I'll be starting that up in the summer. And then I think my bosses are actually probably the most happy about it because I'm gonna stay with them.
Oh, okay.
Yes, confused because I'm on the grad committee and I don't remember your name. But that's a different program.
Yeah, that's I think more college of business, right? If I remember correctly.
It's here. Well, it's joint. But
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's run here, but it's.
Yeah,
with
actually,
management.
Ellen, I think, is going to talk
Right.
later in the semester.
She is, that doesn't surprise me.
Other questions? All right, well, let's thank our speaker. Thanks. Hey, Matt, have a good weekend.
Thank y'all for coming out. Hopefully y'all at least enjoyed it or learned something or both.
Sorry,
Thank you, Matthew.
before the talk started, it's a perfect. It's